Hello and welcome back to Lucas of Elucis. So today I'm going to be talking about my sensory deprivation tank experience that I had last night. So I've been meaning to do a sensory deprivation experience for quite a long time, but just recently I watched a early episode of Hamilton's Pharmacopoeia, which is Hamilton Morris is a chemist and a journalist who has a series called Hamilton's Pharmacopoeia, where he investigates drugs and their effects and their history and all that sort of stuff. It's extremely good. I highly recommend. And I just saw it pop up on my YouTube recommendations, and so I watched that, and I thought, okay, I need to book this experience and do this as soon as possible. So I booked it for a couple days later, which was last night, and so I had the experience, and I thought it would be a good idea to document my thoughts on it and kind of basically a trip report, because that's what it essentially is, in a video form, and put it onto this channel. So I've not planned or prepared exactly how I'm going to describe this, so bear with me as I jump between different aspects of the experience and go over different things that seem relevant. I wrote basically a whole trip report last night afterwards, so I'm going to kind of refer to that if I need to, but I thought it would be better to just speak as it's fresh. I was going to talk about it straight after, but I did it at 7 o'clock, and by the time it was an hour long, and by the time I finished up and got out and got home, it was quite late, and I'd used all of my energy in writing it down. So I thought best to sleep on it, process it a bit, and speak about it the next day while it's still fresh. So let's get into it then. So for those that don't know, a sensory deprivation tank is basically an enclosed tank, as the name suggests, where all of your senses are meant to be completely shut off. So you're deprived from all sensory input and information. So there's a somewhat warm, meant to be body temperature, so you can't feel the water, with Epsom salt, magnesium, and all that. So you float, and the salts and all that are supposed to be really good for your body anyway. I'm not going to get into the supposed benefits and things like that. It's more about the experience and what I got out of it. So you're basically floating in this tank. I'll put a picture in the video so you can see what it looks like anyway. You climb in there, you pull it closed, and you have these little earbuds, or like balls of some jelly sort of thing that you put in your ears to block out the water and sound as well. There's a light, but you turn the light off when you're in there. At least the one that I went in, you turn it off. Pitch black, no visual representation whatsoever. You're relative to nothing in there, which is kind of a key part of the experience that I'll mention. So you're floating. So you're not really, and if you're supposed to stay really still. That's how you kind of lose that sense of physical self as well. So all your senses are basically shut off. You're laying there, you're floating. You can't see anything, you can't hear anything. You're not relative to anything because there's no physical sensation. And we kind of relate to the world by relative. Our relation to the world is relative. Okay, so space and time is all relative to our relation to it. So without any of that, you're kind of in this state of nothingness in a sense, which is quite interesting. So just to give you an overview of what it is, if you're not sure, and kind of to understand the background of it. So I went into this experience with the expectation. So I'll go over my expectations because I think that's important. Now, as I've mentioned in other videos, set and setting is a really important part of a trip of any sort, okay? So of doing any drug, really. Set, setting, drug, and dose. That's like loosely the same thing that Carl Hart talks about in his book, Drug Use for Grown-Ups, which is an awesome book that I highly recommend. I want to discuss that in further detail at another point in time. Set and setting, right. Set, setting, expectation. So the mindset that I brought to it. So I described the setting then, the physical setting. Also, the place is kind of like it kind of has this kind of like a retreat wellness sort of vibe, which was kind of relaxing and nice. It kind of feels like you're being taken out of ordinary society before you even begin the experience, which is cool. At least at the place that I was at, as I know, most of them are like that anyway. So I went in there kind of expecting some kind of powerful experience, right? Because everything I'd heard about it and everything I'd seen seemed like there was some, profundity to be experienced there, and it was that it was an altered and powerful state of consciousness where you could have many meaningful and important experiences and kind of possibly realizations and understandings as well. So, and obviously coming from the perspective of a psychedelic explorer, I went into it with that sort of mindset, the kind of psychonaut mindset where you're going in there expecting some kind of powerful experience, you're strapping yourself in for the ride, you're going to try to give in to the experience and just see what happens. And going into trips, especially mushrooms, given how powerful they are, I often, as most people do, as you should, bring a sense of trepidation and fear. I don't really know anyone that is ever able to do mushrooms without a sense of fear going into them. Once you've done them, it's impossible to not have any fear. It's appropriate fear. And the fear's not a problem. It's just about letting go and surrendering to it and not trying to hold on. But anyway, so I brought in this idea that it was going to be a powerful experience. And so I had some fear, I was excited, slight anxiety, nothing too overwhelming. A couple times I even considered backing out on it because, I haven't done a trip in a while. So, which, I kind of feel the need to do so soon for my own well-being. Too long between trips is when the ego starts to dig in and regain control of the mind, which is not a good thing. And there's only so much that meditation can do to fight the ego. Some experiences to shake up the snow globe, as Michael Pollan describes it. I think he quotes someone else when he says that in his book, How to Change Your Mind. So, I was excited. I was expecting a powerful experience. And so I got in the tank. At first, it was quite strange, different sensations. You can expect it to be pretty weird and just unfamiliar. And so when I got in, I was kind of adjusting to like floating around, and I kept bumping into the walls. And it was hard to keep still, perfectly still. So it took a bit to adjust to being in there, right? And so this was an hour-long experience, I should mention. It was an hour long. They played music for 10 or 15 minutes at the beginning. You can choose whether the light is on or off. I turned it off almost straight away. Sensory deprivation, that's the whole point of it. So the music plays for 10 or 15 minutes, which is good to kind of ease you in. So as you're adjusting to this experience, and zero senses, at least for me, was somewhat anxiety-inducing. Not in a way where it was impactful negatively, but there was this presence of anxiety there. Now, whether that was simply due to a lack of complete stimulus whatsoever, or whether that was kind of reminded me of the difficult parts of a mushroom trip that I had, where I was in close to silent darkness, and it was quite challenging. So I was kind of, in silent darkness, in an altered state, anything can come up. So I was prepared, but I was willing to give in to whatever it was, as I've learnt to do. So I was laying there, feeling out the environment, the water, adjusting, trying to relax, be comfortable, get used to it, be still, and just adjusting to a new environment. And the music helped kind of ease into that. And I still had this kind of like not full relaxation, some kind of anxiety going on there, which I think would be normal. I'm not sure other people's experiences, but it felt... Anyway, so after about 15 minutes, the music stopped and it was completely sensory deprived. So at this point, it was pitch black, no sense of yourself in space unless you moved. your body at all, because then you'd feel your body move in the water, but there was no sense of physical self relative to your environment, because your environment is deprived of you and pitch black as possible. Like, you close your eyes, open your eyes, looks exactly the same, which is very interesting. And obviously no sound, so completely deprived when the music went off. And so that's when I was like, okay, here we go. This is kind of beginning in a sense. And so for the first kind of half, so the next maybe 15 to 20 minutes, I was kind of finishing the adjusting phase, I think. And so I was just basically just seeing what was happening. I was breathing, employing some meditation practice, some mindfulness. But obviously in mindfulness, you are aware of all sense perception that's arising, okay? All phenomena in consciousness that's arising. But in this case, there is no external phenomena arising. It is all internal, plus the breath. So you would have the breath to observe, and you can hear your breathing, you can hear your heartbeat. I could hear my heartbeat, I could hear my breathing at times. Getting used to it. And so what you are only able to then pay attention to, because I practice meditation daily, using waking up. I mean, I've talked about that in previous videos, but it's relevant to this. So I meditate for about 10 minutes a day. I've been doing this since April 2020, more or less every day since then. So, and I bring that into my trips and all these altered experiences. It's a very, very helpful tool to improving and attuning to altered states, whether it's trips or in this case sensory deprivation. And so I was just observing kind of the environment for a while, like whilst there was no environment, just getting used to it. And so I was kind of like expecting maybe some visuals to happen, and I was kind of had some reservations about fully relaxing and giving in. I can now see in hindsight. And I was expecting some visuals and maybe some sounds, something produced by the mind. And so at this point, I thought, there's not too much to this experience. It's, it's not like mushrooms, It's kind of cool, you deprive yourself of your senses, but that's all there is to it, really. Not much is happening. There is no content here. There's no visuals that I'm getting. Nothing is really happening. So I thought, all right, kind of cool, but, felt like maybe this was just kind of cool for people who don't trip or aren't willing to trip. So I was like, all right, whatever. I'm like, I'll just chill, see what happens. And I was kind of a little bit bored because I was expecting something to happen, right? Now, in trips of any sort, you could probably apply this to life generally, but I'll keep it to trips for this time. Any trip or altered state, to expect something is both futile and impactful on your experience. So when you expect something, you're essentially bringing some preconception of what the experience will be. Now, in the case of a psychedelic trip, your expectations will always be subverted. No trip is like another trip, but that applies generally in life, that no new phenomena is the same as previous phenomena or experience. No two experiences are the same. Every present moment is entirely new. So I had this expectation, and I think that impacted what I thought was going to happen. Impacted my experience so far. And so then I kind of thought, all right, I'll whatever. So I kind of gave up. And once I gave up, once I let go of that expectation and kind of resigned to the fact that this is all it was, that's when the experience began, really, I think. And that is why I think that sensory deprivation experiences ought to be like long. Like 1 hour was, by the end of it, I kind of needed a bit more time, I think. Or I could have gone with a bit more time. I didn't really want to get out. I'm sure subsequent ones I'll be able to tune into the experience a lot quicker. Although, yeah, it could have been longer. So once I gave up, I kind of gave into everything. Then I was able to really start experiencing it. So I just, all right, whatever, this is it. It's not that cool. And so I let go of the expectation of this to be some kind of special or interesting experience, right? I stopped looking for something in the experience. And so when I did that, the experience changed. The experience kind of took a turn. I was fully relaxed at this point as well. I'd let go of all trepidation, all anxiety, fear, expectation, all of that. It was all gone. And so I was just there completely just like, all right, I'm just chilling now. And then I started to notice some things. And it was like, so what I was noticing was different thoughts and feelings were very, very clearly presented. Okay. So this was the key thing from the experience. So this is where I can get into now what I really got out of the experience and what I think it can offer. So I brought these mindfulness techniques and things like that. Now, it seemed to me that I could really pinpoint a thought and a feeling and investigate that thought and feeling through awareness in a way that I could not do ordinarily. Now, I attribute that to once all this, I described it as once all the static clears, right? It feels like it clears all the static, all the background, and provides something of a sterile, kind of under a microscope environment, free of all stimulus to investigate the mind. The self, though, this is the thing. So it was not an experience of a psychedelic experience where the mind manifests in a way that is not necessarily clear and the self is disrupted and all content of the mind comes up and you don't even know what the hell's going on, but you're trying to understand it. It wasn't like that. This was not a selfless experience. Now, psychedelics and meditation disrupt the sense of self. This is what the focus of my research is on, where I'm currently putting together a proposal for a PhD, and I'm focusing on the selfless aspect of psychedelics and meditation. Now, I think that's the key insight to be gained from those experiences. Disrupt the sense of self, show us that the self is not what we thought it was at the very least, or possibly that it doesn't exist at all, which is the view that I hold, a discrete self. See my previous video for a discussion on that. This was not an experience that disrupted the sense of self. This disrupted, obviously, all senses and distraction to observing the manifestations of the self. Now, when the mind was quiet, when senses were deprived and distractions were removed, the self was able to manifest itself. That's the way I see it. So I was able to see different thoughts and feelings kind of as if all the static was cleared and I was looking at it under a microscope and I could just grab that thought, just grab that feeling and investigate it and just look deeper and deeper and explore that and try to understand it. You know, you can imagine like a completely, because it's literally what it is, a completely blank, sterile, senseless environment, and you just pull out a thought, you pull out a feeling, and then you just have an investigation of that. That's what it was like. And after a while, so as I described, it took me a while to get to that point, but then I was able to begin doing that, and that was interesting. So I feel like once you give up everything and let go of all expectation and you stop trying, and that's the Taoist thing that always seems to be true, do not force something. You know, the Wu way of Taoism, which is to not force. So as with anything, if you stop forcing, then you'll be able to have the thing, in a sense. So I was able to take certain feelings that I had, and this became a very introspective inquiry into the self and thoughts and feelings. So it was like examining one's feelings for their meaning and their deeper roots. And so this is kind of similar to, there's a meditation teacher called Joseph Goldstein, who he has many talks on waking up, Sam Harris's meditation app, and I listen to heaps of them, and I find him to be one of the most helpful people in teaching a deeper understanding of Buddhism and the kind of comprehensive understanding of what you're using meditation for, what this awareness can help you do, and the teachings of the Buddha and the sayings of the Buddha. Extremely valuable. It's been to my meditation practice. And so Joseph Goldstein often talks about inquiring into your own conditioned phenomena. So whatever arises, we have a reaction to, a conditioned understanding of. And so in this sensory deprivation experience, I was able to observe this conditioning. And so I had this feeling. So I had a particularly difficult day, emotionally difficult day. And so I was able to take that feeling that I had related to this difficult day and see it exactly for what it was. And it really amazed me at how I could name that feeling, and I could understand it and like identify it so well. And it's like, okay, cool. And different things started popping up at this point. And so I kind of felt like I was in tune with it now. So things would pop up, I would take them, and then I would just kind of investigate them. It's like they're under a microscope. And I was getting a lot of really effective inquiry into my own mental content, my thoughts, my feelings. And then I started doing it a bit deliberately. So trying to push forth something I've been thinking about, a problem in my life or an aspect of myself. And so I felt like mental content, such as thoughts and feelings, nothing really new though. It felt like it was things that already exist within myself, because I'm in my ordinary state of waking consciousness. However, my environment is changed. Okay, so I am the same. Environment is changed, which allows things to come forth in a clearer way. So it's very clear. And so memories, connections between memories and thoughts and feelings I have, deep investigation of the self, really. So it was not a selfless experience at all. It was all about the self. And so I was really able to learn some things about how I thought, what I think and how I feel, and certain things in my life that I would like some clarity on. It provided a space to be able to do that really well, which was very interesting. And then I began to be able to be more still as well. So around this time, there was kind of a thing, like a round kind of halo-y sort of thing that you're supposed to put under your neck during the float. But the lady at the place said, at first do it without it to align your spine or something. So the first half I tried it like that, and my neck was quite sore now. I kind of have quite a stiff neck and things like that. I have a lot of tension there, so that didn't surprise me, but it was quite sore, and I felt like my neck needed some support. So when I kind of at that point where I'd kind of given up, before I got into all this bit that I just mentioned, then I got the halo thing, I put it behind my head, and I was like, okay, that's much more comfortable. And so I felt like I was able to be more still and comfortable then. So I was able to really feel the sensory deprivation at that point. So I was better at the technique of doing this sensory deprivation experience, because how you do it is important. If you're sitting there moving around all the time, you're not going to get that actual deprivation, and the experience is not going to be able to unfold. In the same way that if you have too many expectations or you're trying for something to happen, the experience is not going to be able to unfold. And it's not like psychedelics where the mushroom is going to take your expectations and smack you in the face with them and say, all right, you sit down. You're going to have what I tell you to have. It's just going to be what it is in this case. It's a good trial run for psychedelics in that way, because, okay, I'm going to go on a tangent here and then go back to what I was saying, if I can remember what I was saying, but I'll try. Like I said, going to be all over the place a little bit, but I think this has been quite linear anyway. So, what was I even saying? So the whole process is somewhat similar to being psychedelic. So you kind of go into the experience with these, trying to go into the experience without expectations. Inevitably, you bring some expectations. You're expecting some kind of manifestation of the self, some kind of experience to glean something about the mind and learn from it. You go into it, you have some fear. At least I should speak about my own experience rather than collectively, generally. So I have some fear, some trepidation, but I'm doing it anyway. I'm willing to let go of that. I'm willing to accept the experience for what it is. I'm willing to learn something. You go through the experience. There's this kind of come up phase, the adjustment, as there is with psychedelics, especially with mushrooms. Mushrooms, definitely, there's a come up phase where you're adjusting to it, you're getting used to it. This is where mostly the fear settles in and the ego marches its defenses forward to combat the freeing of the mind, really, and you have to just let go. And then the ego, which doesn't actually really exist, it's just kind of a defense mechanism in a sense, can allow it to dissipate and the experience to settle in, and then you adjust. You've kind of gotten used to hyperspace. It can be a difficult adjustment at times. And so this was similar, obviously not quite difficult, but you have to let all those feelings go, and then the experience can begin, and you can start to see what's going on. You can start to learn things. You can start to experience things. You can start to investigate and explore, right? And then afterwards, you have kind of a sense of, I at least had a sense of renewal, a sense of refreshment. Now, interestingly, when I got out, it kind of felt like I was in the womb. I was getting close. I wanted to be in longer because I began to explore things and I began to get a touch for certain deeply held memories that I wanted to flesh out, because I felt like, as I was saying before, now I can tie in these 2 points, laying entirely still and not moving allowed more content to arise and allowed the mind to be tapped into more. So I was able to tap into more content of the mind, more thoughts, more feelings, and dig deeper and explore into it and allow certain memories or scenarios to play out so I could kind of watch them in almost a lucid dreaming sort of way, and then investigate from there and see what I can glean. But again, in a very pointed, sterile kind of environment where there was this one thing that I was looking at and able to see it very clearly. And so, now what was I saying? And so I wanted to tap into some memories possibly, and I felt like there was a hint of I felt like I could have gone to explore this might sound ridiculous, but I felt like I could have explored some kind of womb memory. Now, before you dismiss that as some kind of bullshit, Stanislav Grof, who was a pioneering scientist in studying psychedelics in the 20th century, did a lot of research on LSD, and then when LSD was banned, did a lot of research with holotropic breath work. And so he would basically have people undergo these experiences, and as they do now in the modern studies where people have psychedelic experiences, psychedelic assisted psychotherapy. So that's what it was, and then it was holotropic breathwork assisted psychotherapy, as far as I understand. And so he did a lot of research on birth trauma, and people reliving memories from their birth, which is really interesting because that was a formative experience. It was our first experience. It was our first home, right? So there is definitely going to be some memory in our mind from the womb, whether that's so deeply embedded that we will never be able to experience, or we are able to experience it. But in any case, we cannot experience this in ordinary waking consciousness, under ordinary conditions, I should say. And we would have no way of knowing the potential impacts of birth trauma or birth experience on who we are now. And we easily dismiss that. We don't really think about that. But Groff shows that there is something to that. And so say people had a birth through cesarean section, or they had to have their head pulled out, with any kind of birth that's not smooth, where you've come out with your head fucking yanked out. It's a traumatic experience. That's the first one. You come out bloody and crying. We shouldn't dismiss that. And so I felt like I could kind of glean some. It felt like I was in the womb, and based on the ability to explore deep into the mind in those conditions of the deprivation, I felt like I could potentially tap into that memory. Maybe I'll see next time or in later times and learn something from that, which it was very interesting. Felt like there was much more exploration to be done. I kind of just got going towards the end. I did a lot of good work, a lot of good realizations, a lot of good understandings and explorations, but I felt like, I wanted to keep going. In that Hamilton Morris video I watched, he ended up doing an 8-hour session whilst high. That would be really interesting. I'd like to do a longer session. I'd also like to do a session while high, that is under the influence of cannabis. I wouldn't maybe one day it'd be worth tripping there. That would be really interesting. If someone has had any interesting deprivation experiences, both just ordinarily and under the influence of a psychedelic or a drug, please let me know. I'd love to hear about that. That would be really interesting. But yeah, I'd like to do a longer one, and I'd like to do one high, which I will do, and then I'll report on that, because this is really interesting. So being completely still and removing the senses enabled this kind of these experiences and memories and thoughts and emotions to pop up, and to be able to investigate them under sterile conditions with static removed. So yeah, I don't remember exactly what I was just saying, but I think that kind of covers a lot of it. What have I been talking now for 30 something minutes? Really interesting experience. So the kind of takeaways, I guess, are it's an experience of the self. It's a self experience. And I was, I guess, expecting it to be a selfless experience. But it's an experience where the self is there, and different parts of the self, thoughts, feelings, memories, very much related to who you are and your thoughts and feelings and memories, and everyday things were able to be investigated into and looked at in a way that you ordinarily can't because of too much distraction. It's like when you're meditating, you're often... It's different to meditating though. You're not going into the tank to meditate, and you're not like... Because meditation is being aware of the appearances of consciousness as awareness itself, as consciousness itself. And the self is one of those experiences that you... one of those senses, one of those appearances of consciousness that you become aware of. Whereas in this, it's not like you're meditating. You're allowing things of the self and the mind to come up, really. That's what I did, at least. I should speak more from my experience rather than you are doing this. Typically, as humans, we like to generalize our experience to the whole and other people's experience. I think that's a lot of the problem that humans have in interacting with each other. We say, my experience is the way it is, and if you don't match up with that, then there's something wrong with your experience, or it's not right. But no, this was my experience, and so that's the way I understood it. I should clarify. Also, it would be quite cool to be able to realize something that you can generalize and say, this is how it is for everyone. I know this. I've learnt this. And it's tempting to do that with psychedelics and altered states. And there's some things you can do about that. There's some things you can generalize and say are the way for everyone or lots of people, or is a key feature of that experience itself. But you should be mindful. I just did it then. I should be mindful to not do that. And to speak from my experience. And so, it was a self-experience where contents of the self were able to arise. At least that is what this first particular experience was. That's what this first particular experience that I had was. Who knows what the next one will be? As the lady there explained to me, each float is different. And I think that would definitely be the case, as each trip is different, as everything is different. And it would only be kind of, foolish to think that it would be the same, or that I would know what was going to happen. So overall, I think sensory deprivation is an awesome, amazing, interesting, powerful experience. I'll just get to how I felt after, actually. So when I got out, I kind of felt like I got out of the womb, and it felt really cool because it was like, it kind of had that LSD afterglow kind of feel where, or even during an LSD trip, but kind of the afterglow when you're kind of coming down or just beginning to come up. And everything looks kind of like fresh and new, like you're seeing it for the first time. And it was kind of like that. I was looking at my hands and I was like, whoa, it's like, that looks cool. That kind of looks like not me, but me. And that's what essentially we are, because there is no me that owns and holds things. There is just appearances in consciousness and the whole headless thing and all that. So for a discussion on that, see my previous video. It was, I felt kind of really, I felt calm but excited, peaceful, and I felt when I trip, and I've heard other people say this before, I kind of have a sense of feeling, it sounds funny to those who haven't tripped, but a sense of feeling groovy, right? I just feel groovy in my body. I feel like I'm flowing and moving in this really groovy kind of in tune sense, and my body feels cool, right? And I felt like that afterwards. I felt very like flowy and groovy, and yeah, that reminded me of psychedelics as well, which was cool. So yeah, it had that kind of afterglow, and I felt after I trip, I usually, or this is particularly the case with LSD. This is more like LSD than it was mushrooms. Mushrooms kind of knock me around, and the lady there said that some people feel like they've been thrown around and beaten up a bit. They kind of feel a bit worn out from the experience, but I felt more energized. Not in a like I'm going to start running around and doing a bunch of shit, but energized in the sense that myself felt reinvigorated and reignited in a sense, and also that all static and bullshit kind of cleared away. I did feel a sense of renewal, snow globe shaking up, which was really important for me at this time, and in general, it's an important, good experience. But yeah, it did kind of have that LSD sort of thing going on to it. Yeah, so very interesting. I felt quite good afterwards, and I had a sense of clarity of both thought and speech. I always have a clarity in my speech and articulation and understanding of thought and self and all that during or after a trip of any sort, mushrooms, LSD. So yeah, that was quite interesting as well, and I was able to very clearly write down my thoughts on the experience and everything. I felt, I just wrote a bunch of stuff down. There was like a chill out lounge, as they called it, after, with some tea and music on, and comfortable lounges, which was pretty cool. So I wrote down all what I could into my notes on my phone straight afterwards, which kind of gave me the integration of the experience to then speak about now. Well, this is also part of the integration itself because I'm speaking about the experience. I think that basically covers just about everything. Well, it definitely doesn't cover everything. There's a lot more that I could say. But yeah, I think that's the key things to take away from it. That's my trip report on my first sensory deprivation tank experience. So yeah, very interesting, very worthwhile, highly recommend. If you have experiences of your own, please tell me about them. I'd love to hear about them. In terms of this channel, I will be doing some podcast type episodes. One I'm going to do soon with one of my very good friends who is as much of a philosopher as I am. So we always have great discussions just whenever we hang out. So I thought that'd be awesome to do a kind of more podcast type discussion and put it on the channel. I'll also do more videos on other things as the time comes. But as I said, I'm working on my PhD proposal, so that's taking some of my time, but I'd really love to do more videos and share my general thoughts on this channel, as I will do. So thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed hearing about this. I hope you got something out of it. I hope that makes you excited to do a sensory deprivation tank experience, because I highly recommend it. It was really cool. If you have any questions about the experience or anything else, recommendations, let me know. Thank you for listening. Lucas of Elusis. Until next time.